Hey family, and anybody else watching, and welcome back to As For Me in My House. Today we are looking at 1 Samuel 12, 13, and 14, going out to my mom and Bruce. We are looking at the transfer of power largely from no king or no leader to specifically Saul. And we looked at that yesterday. We saw the introduction of Saul after Israel asked for a king. We saw his anointing, his kingship, his defeat of the Ammonites, and then also, what was that? Yeah, his defeat of the Ammonites in Jabesh, so Jabesh Gilead. Today we're going to be looking at Samuel's farewell. We'll look at his rebuke of Saul. Again, Saul's just been appointed. We'll look at the rebuke, and then we'll look at Israel versus the Philistines, and then his son Jonathan, Saul's son Jonathan, having some honey. And we'll talk a little bit about humility. And we'll talk a little bit about ego, because this is pretty interesting stuff going on here at the outset of some of Saul's kingship. So again, we'll look at this in 1 Samuel 12, 13, and 14. So, chapter 12. Samuel said to all Israel, I have listened to everything you said to me and have set a king over you. Now you have a king as your leader. As for me, I'm old and gray, and my sons are here with you. I've been your leader from my youth until this day. Here I stand. Testify against me in the presence of the Lord and his anointed. Whose ox have I taken? Whose donkey have I taken? Whom have I cheated? Whom have I oppressed? From whose hand have I accepted a bribe to make me shut my eyes? If I've done any of these, I will make it right. You've not cheated or oppressed us, they replied. You've not taken anything from anyone's hand. Samuel said to them, The Lord is witness against you, and also his anointed is witness this day that you have not found anything in my hand. He is witness, they said. Then Samuel said to the people, It is the Lord who appointed Moses and Aaron and brought your forefathers up out of Egypt. Now then, stand there, because I am going to confront you with evidence before the Lord as to all the righteous acts performed by the Lord for you and your fathers. After Jacob entered Egypt, they cried to the Lord for help, and the Lord sent Moses and Aaron, who brought your forefathers out of Egypt, and they settled them in this place. But they forgot the Lord their God. So he sold them into the hand of Sisera, the commander of the army of Hazor, and into the hands of the Philistines and the king of Moab, who fought against them. They cried out to the Lord and said, We have sinned. We have forsaken the Lord and served the Baals and the Ashtoreths. But now deliver us from the hands of our enemies, and we will serve you. Then the Lord sent them Jerubbaal, Barak, Jephthah, and Samuel, and he delivered you from the hands of your enemies on every side. So that you lived securely. But when you saw that Nahash, king of the Ammonites, was moving against you, you said to me, No, we want a king to rule over us, even though the Lord your God was your king. Now, here is the king you have chosen, the one you asked for. See, the Lord has set a king over you. If you fear the Lord and serve and obey him, and do not rebel against his commands, and if both you and the king who reigns over you follow the Lord your God, good. But if you do not obey the Lord, and if you rebel against his command, his hand will be against you, as it was against your fathers. Now then, stand still and see this great thing the Lord is about to do before your eyes. Is it not wheat harvest now? I will call upon the Lord to send thunder and rain, and you will realize what an evil thing you did in the eyes of the Lord when you asked for a king. Then Samuel called upon the Lord, and that same day the Lord sent thunder and rain. So all the people stood in awe of the Lord and of Samuel. The people all said to Samuel, Pray to the Lord your God for your servants, so that we will not die, for we have added to our other sins the evil of asking for a king. Do not be afraid, Samuel replied. You have done all this evil, yet do not turn away from the Lord, but serve the Lord with all your heart. Do not turn away after useless idols. They can do you no good, nor can they rescue you, because they are useless. For the sake of his great name, the Lord will not reject his people, because the Lord was pleased to make you his own. As for me, far be it from me that I should sin against the Lord by failing to pray for you. And I will teach you the way that is good and right. But be sure to fear the Lord and serve him faithfully with all your heart. Consider what great things he has done for you. Yet, if you persist in doing evil, both you and your king will be swept away. Chapter 13. Saul was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned over Israel 42 years. Saul chose 3,000 men from Israel. 2,000 were with him at Michmash and in the hill country of Bethel, and 1,000 were with Jonathan at Gibeah and Benjamin. The rest of the men he sent back to their homes. Jonathan attacked the Philistine outpost at Gibeah, and the Philistines heard about it. Then Saul had the trumpet blown throughout the land and said, "Let the Hebrews hear." So all Israel heard the news. Saul has attacked the Philistine outpost, and now Israel has become a stench to the Philistines, and the people were summoned to join Saul at Gilgal. The Philistines assembled to fight Israel with 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, and soldiers as numerous as the sand on the seashore. They went up and camped at Michmash east of Beth-aven. When the men of Israel saw that the situation was critical and that their army was hard pressed, they hid in caves and thickets among the rocks and in pits and cisterns. Some Hebrews even crossed the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. Saul remained at Gilgal, and all his troops with him were quaking with fear. He waited 7 days, the time set by Samuel. But Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and Saul's men began to scatter. So he said, "Bring me the burnt offering and fellowship offerings." And Saul offered up the burnt offering. Just as he finished making the offering, Samuel arrived, and Saul went out to greet him. "What have you done?" asked Samuel. Saul replied, "When I saw that the men were scattering and that you did not come at the set time, and that the Philistines were assembling at Michmash, I thought, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not sought the Lord's favor, so I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering." "You acted foolishly," Samuel said. "You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him leader of his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command." Then Samuel left Gilgal and went up to Gibeah and Benjamin, and Saul counted the men who were with him. They numbered about 600. Saul and his son Jonathan, and the men with them, while staying in Gibeah in Benjamin, while the Philistines camped at Michmash. Raiding parties went down from the Philistine camp in 3 detachments. One turned towards Ophrah in the vicinity of Shoal, another toward Beth-horon, and the third toward the borderland, overlooking the valley of Zeboim, facing the desert. Not a blacksmith could be found in the whole land of Israel, because the Philistines had said, "Otherwise the Hebrews will make swords or spears." So all Israel went down to the Philistines to have their plowshares, mattocks, axes, and sickles sharpened, at the price of 2/3 of a shekel for sharpening plowshares and mattocks, and 1/3 of a shekel for sharpening forks and axes, and for repointing goads. So, on the day of the battle, not a soldier with Saul and Jonathan had a sword or spear in his hand. Only Saul and his son Jonathan had them. Chapter 14. Now, a detachment of Philistines had gone out to the pass at Michmash. One day, Jonathan, son of Saul, came to the young man bearing his armor. "Come, let's go over to the Philistine outpost on the other side." But he did not tell his father. Saul was staying on the outskirts of Gibeah under a pomegranate tree in Migron. With him were about 600 men, among whom was Ahijah, who was wearing an ephod. He was a son of Ichabod's father, Ahitub, son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the Lord's priest in Shiloh. No one was aware that Jonathan had left. On each side of the pass that Jonathan intended to cross to reach the Philistine outpost was a cliff. One was called Bozez, the other Seneh. One cliff stood to the north toward Michmash, the other south toward Geba. Jonathan said to his young armor-bearer, "Come, let's go over to the outpost of these uncircumcised fellows. Perhaps the Lord will act in our behalf. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few." "Do all that you have in mind," his armor-bearer said. "Go ahead. I am with you, heart and soul." Jonathan said, "Come then. We will cross over to the men and let them see us. If they say to us, 'Wait here until we come to you,' then we will stay where we are and not go up to them. But if they say, 'Come up to us,' we will climb up, because that will be our sign that the Lord has given them into our hands." So both of them showed themselves to the Philistine outpost. "Look," said the Philistines, "the Hebrews are crawling out of the holes they were hiding in." The men of the outpost shouted to Jonathan and his armor-bearer, "Come up to us, and we'll teach you a lesson." So Jonathan said to his armor-bearer, "Climb up after me. The Lord has given them into the hand of Israel." Jonathan climbed up, using his hands and feet, with his armor-bearer right behind him. The Philistines fell before Jonathan, and his armor-bearer followed and killed behind him. In that first attack, Jonathan and his armor-bearer killed some 20 men in an area of about half an acre. Then panic struck the whole army, those in the camp and field, and those in the outpost and raiding parties, and the ground shook. It was a panic sent by God. Saul's outlooks at Gibeah and Benjamin saw the army melting away in all directions. Then Saul said to the men who were with him, "Muster the forces and see who has left us." When they did, it was Jonathan and his armor bearer who were not there. Saul said to Ahijah, "Bring the ark of God." At that time, it was with the Israelites. While Saul was talking to the priest, the tumult in the Philistine camp increased more and more. So Saul said to the priest, "Withdraw your hand." Then Saul and all his men assembled and went to the battle. They found the Philistines in total confusion, striking each other with their swords. Those Hebrews who had previously been with the Philistines had gone up with them to their camp and went over to the Israelites, who were with Saul and Jonathan. When all the Israelites who had hidden in the hill country of Ephraim heard that the Philistines were on the run, they joined the battle in hot pursuit. So the Lord rescued Israel that day, and the battle moved on toward Beth-aven. Now, the men of Israel were in distress that day, because Saul had bound the people under an oath, saying, "Cursed be any man who eats food before the evening comes, before I have avenged myself on my enemies." So none of the troops tasted food. The entire army entered the woods, and there was honey on the ground. When they went into the woods, they saw the honey oozing out, yet no one put his hand to his mouth, because they feared the oath. But Jonathan had not heard that his father had bound the people with an oath, so he reached out to the end of the staff that was in his hand and dipped it into the honeycomb. He raised his hand to his mouth, and his eyes brightened. Then one of the soldiers told him, "Your father bound the army under a strict oath, saying, 'Cursed be any man who eats food today.' That is why the men are faint." Jonathan said, "My father has made trouble for the country. See how my eyes brightened when I tasted a little of this honey? How much better would it have been if the men had eaten today some of the plunder they took from their enemies? Would not the slaughter of the Philistines been even greater?" That day, after the Israelites had struck down the Philistines from Michmash to Aijalon, they were exhausted. They pounced on the plunder, and taking sheep, cattle, and calves, they butchered them on the ground and ate them, together with the blood. Then someone said to Saul, "Look, the men are sinning against the Lord by eating meat that has blood in it." "You have broken faith," he said. "Roll a large stone over here at once." Then he said, "Go out among the men and tell them, 'Each of you, bring me your cattle and sheep, and slaughter them here and eat them. Do not sin against the Lord by eating meat with blood still in it.'" So everyone brought his ox that night and slaughtered it there. Then Saul built an altar to the Lord. It was the first time he had done this. Saul said, "Let us go down after the Philistines by night and plunder them till dawn, and let us not leave one of them alive." "Do whatever seems best to you," they replied. But the priest said, "Let us inquire of God here." So Saul asked God, "Shall I go down after the Philistines? Will you give them into Israel's hand?" But God did not answer him that day. Saul therefore said, "Come here, all you who are leaders of the army, and let us find out what sin has been committed today. As surely as the Lord, who rescues Israel, lives, even if it lies with my own son Jonathan, he must die." But not one of the men said a word. Saul then said to all the Israelites, "You stand over there, and I and Jonathan my son will stand over here." "Do what seems best to you," the men replied. Then Saul prayed to the Lord, the God of Israel, "Give me the answer. Give me the right answer." And Jonathan and Saul were taken by lot, and the men were cleared. Saul said, "Cast lots between me and Jonathan my son." And Jonathan was taken. Then Saul said to Jonathan, "Tell me what you have done." So Jonathan told him, "I merely tasted a little honey with the end of my staff, and now must I die?" Saul said, "May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if you do not die, Jonathan." But the men said to Saul, "Should Jonathan die? He who has brought about this great deliverance in Israel? Never, as surely as the Lord lives, not a hair on his head will fall to the ground, for he did this today with God's help." So the men rescued Jonathan, and he was not put to death. Then Saul stopped pursuing the Philistines, and they withdrew to their own land. After Saul had summoned rule over Israel, he fought against their enemies on every side: Moab, the Ammonites, Edom, the kings of Zobah, and the Philistines. Wherever he turned, he inflicted punishment on them. He fought valiantly and defeated the Amalekites, delivering Israel from the hand of those who had plundered them. Saul's sons were Jonathan, Ishvi, and Malchishua. The name of his older daughter was Merab, and the younger was Michal. His wife's name was Ahinoam, daughter of Ahimaaz. The name of the commander of Saul's army was Abner, the son of Ner, and Ner was Saul's uncle. Saul's father Kish and Abner's father Ner were sons of Abiel. All the days of Saul there was bitter war with the Philistines, and whenever Saul saw a mighty or brave man, he took them into his service. And we knew that was coming, right? We knew that, 1452, that very last verse there, we knew that was coming. I mean, that was warned. If you ask for a king, here is what the king is going to do. The king is going to take your daughters and make them as bread makers and as bakers and cleaning stuff, cleaning, I think what did it say? I don't remember what it said, but it's going to take the very best of all you have, going to take your sons and daughters and put them into your service. And sure enough, anytime he sees a strong person, a strong son, he's going to take him, put him into his service. And we knew that was coming. But what I thought was interesting here was actually in 14:24. It's incredibly relevant for me right now, and something that I'm now thinking about given your approach, Mom, to me and both John and Jeff as well. 14:24. Now the men of Israel were in distress that day because Saul had bound the people under an oath, saying, "Cursed be any man who eats food before evening comes, before I have avenged myself on my enemies." This note says, Saul's problems here surface in two ways. First, he impulsively pronounced a curse, a very solemn vow, without thinking it through. This rash vow made his hungry army less effective and led to trouble for his own son. Second, Saul apparently saw the battle as a personal vendetta in which he was avenging himself on his enemies. A wiser leader would have understood that God's honor and the security of his people were the issues. I think it's so easy to make rash vows. It's so easy to let your mouth just talk out of feeling. And I do that all the time. And I think that there can be not only hurt in that, but there can be a great danger in that. I mean, just as he said, even if the fault lies with my own son, Jonathan. He didn't know Jonathan was guilty, but he said that. And it's like God was ironically showing him, hey, this vow that you made, it was good for no one. You made it because you wanted it. It had nothing to do with me or my priorities for your people, or my people, rather. I think that that's, again, something that we can fall prey into. I've been hearing from Rayleigh lately something that it's a real check to my heart. And so if I get worked up, or sometimes if I'm speaking too loud, I'll hear Rayleigh say, chill, everybody chill, shh. And there's two things there, right? If I'm correcting her, then number one, that's a respect issue. Okay, well, we got to deal with that. But number two, yeah, there's part of that's really helpful. I mean, that calls maybe my angers and gotten out of check. And the very fact that she says it, number one, it's funny, right? But there is that element, well, are you being disrespectful? Or, man, good grief. Maybe God's using you a little bit to tell me that I do need to chill and to say, oh, good grief, sweetie, I'm sorry. Daddy got worked up and that wasn't fair to you. I don't know how many times I've had to apologize to my 3-year-old, but it's been more than I wanted already. But I think that's, Mom and Bruce, where you guys come in. And I'm so thankful for your humility and so thankful for the non-rashness of your decisions, for the thoughtful processes that you go through when interacting, when talking to me, when talking to Rayleigh. There's that calm demeanor there that dials back rash promises or saying quick things. And that's something that, yeah, I know is going to take me a lifetime to achieve, but I'm so thankful for that, because I think God honors that much more when we take a second and we recognize, how can I honor God in this situation, instead of just blurting out what I want to say, because so much negativity and badness can happen because of that. Worth praying about. So let's do it. My God, I thank you for my mom. I thank you for Bruce. I thank you for the love that you have shown me and my family through them, Lord. I thank you for the strong upbringing that my mom has given me. And I thank you for the weight of words that you have impressed upon her heart, that she speaks after thinking, Lord, that you have given her a mind to do that, and not a mouth that utters rash promises or says rash things or too quickly acts, Lord. I pray that you help me learn that as I am raising my own daughters, God. And I pray that you continue to give me grace when I fail in that area. But God, infinitely more, I thank you for your son, Jesus, who never spoke rashly, Lord, but every word out of his mouth was from you. And we thank you so, so much for that perfect example. And it's in his name we pray. Amen. Well, Mom, Bruce, good grief. I love you tons. Holy moly. For anyone else watching, know that I appreciate you as well, and I will plan on seeing you tomorrow. Have a good one.